Hello, it is I, Dr. Brian Lorgon 111, and welcome back to more developer commentary about Vanilla Swirl CTM. I am back in another copy of the map that I played with Cthulhu and Circaz, and in today's episode I'm going to start trying to talk about the implementation of the map, which is to say how I actually wrote code to do all these things. Creeper, what are you doing over here? You're not supposed to be here, it's daytime out. And yeah, it was a struggle to do the first 3 episodes of this series, where I just kind of flew around the map and rambled and talked about different things based on some notes that I had. It's going to be even more difficult, I think, for me to try to talk through this, because now I'm going to be looking at the source code and talking through the code. And so I think I'm going to usually have it's going to be like a slideshow and have some screenshots of bits of the code, or occasionally screenshots of things in Minecraft that it corresponds to. Probably is how I'm going to do it. I have to figure out how I'm going to edit this all together. And I'm sure I'll be rambling once again. There really is a lot of interesting things that I'd like to talk about, but I apologize beforehand if the presentation isn't that great, because this is hard to do and I'm not sure exactly how to do it. But let's go ahead and get started and talk through an overview of the code I use to produce Vanilla Swirl CTM. To start things off, just quick background on the tooling I am using. I'm using the F# programming language and programming things in Visual Studio, because I used to work at Microsoft on the F# programming language and its Visual Studio integration. And it's the language I'm most familiar with, and it's a good language for both kind of scripting stuff as well as kind of larger scale software engineering stuff. And the project, I probably have a screenshot of kind of like the overall solution layout for the project that I'm building that actually does all the code for Vanilla Swirl CTM, and it's actually part of a larger application I just have for editing Minecraft maps. And so Minecraft Bingo is also in here, and some other projects are also in here, and they're all just part of the same build, and I just compile things different ways when I want to do different things. And yeah, there's about 6,000 lines of code, I think, related to Vanilla Swirl CTM. And so we'll just talk through a few different bits. An overview of what's here that's going to be interesting to talk about. There are customization knobs, which are various constants that talk about things, whether this is going to be a single-player map or a multiplayer map, or whether it's going to be in UHC mode or an easy mode, or exactly the distribution of spawners in different dungeons and different things. So if I'm just trying to tweak knobs, I can do things there. There are strings, which are going to contain kind of all of the text in the map. So if I want to translate it to another language, I can just edit that one file and be able to do that. There are loot tables, which describe the loot tables both for the mobs as well as for the various chests that you find throughout the map. There's terrain analysis and manipulation is the big file that kind of goes through and makes all of the changes to the map, adds all the swirls of dungeons and loot chests and monument, and substituting all the silverfish blocks in and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, those are the main ones that are related to Vanilla Swirl CTM. There's also like NBT manipulation, and region files are basically things that know how to read and write the Minecraft map data files. There's things like recompute lighting, which does what you imagined. It recomputes the lighting, because after you make changes and add a bedrock ceiling, it changes the way that Minecraft stores and computes the lighting, and so I need to go and do that. And also Minecraft isn't very good at computing lighting anyway, and so I also have my own module that just computes the lighting correctly and puts that into Minecraft map files. And yeah, there's a bunch of other files that are unrelated to Vanilla Swirl CTM in here, and so I won't talk about those right now. So that was kind of an overview of the main files that are in the project, and so now I guess let's just kind of go through them one by one, starting with customization knobs. I've got a few knobs right at the top. I should have some screenshots of the code on the screen, hopefully now. And there's basically a number of booleans, true or false, for are we in UHC mode? Is this single player versus multiplayer? Is this an easy version of the map where the spawners and silverfish are turned down? Or is this a hard version of the map where a bunch of new things have been added in the recently released map? Things like it thunderstorms outside of the spawn area, like outside of the pillars in the circle. So it doesn't just get dark outside, it turns into a thunderstorm. And I've actually, when I've been playing it, like I've had skeleton traps spawn beside me, I've been hit by lightning. It's very exciting. As well as no grass and no meat, because if you've played the new hard X version of the map, you will discover that all of the grass has been replaced with podzol, so animals don't spawn, and there are no cows and rabbits and things like that. So yeah, steak is kind of overpowered, and so that makes things harder. In any case, there's also things like debug chest, which I kind of showed off in the previous developer commentary video, which is basically just a double chest full of items that has all the other chests that you can find throughout the world kind of in it, as well as all the books that you find throughout the world, so that when I'm just trying to test to make sure that my loot tables are working correctly, or test to make sure that any text that I changed in one of the books that you find in the final dungeon is correct, I can just turn on debug chests, and it just has all those items available at spawn, so I don't have to fly all around the map to find all of those things. And then there's also some constants. There's the Kurt special, which is when Kurt and I were playing the map back in April. It was basically, it changed the loot tables so that zombies would sometimes drop our player heads. There are the silverfish limiter constants. After watching some people play the early March versions of the map, it was clear that if witches got into infighting in some of the dungeons and threw poison potions at each other, the silverfish would be overwhelming, and there were just silverfish everywhere, and it would lag people's games, and so I added the silverfish limiter, and we'll probably get to the code for that at some point. And so those are the main kind of constants that I can tweak super easily in the customization knobs, but then I can also just go ahead and change things like spawner data. And so, hopefully on the screen now, I have the spawner data for the different mega dungeons. Things like the Green Beacon Cave. It will just show you that there are zombies, skeletons, and creepers are the different spawners that get added into the walls in the Green Beacon Cave in a ratio of 5 to 1 to 1. So for every 7 spawners, 5 of them will be zombies, 1 of them will be skeletons, 1 of them will be creepers. And yeah, then there's also some code that has a delay function, which is basically tells whether the spawners are primed or not, which is basically how many ticks is it going to take for the spawner to spin up. And they are either primed, where they spin up the immediate first tick that the player gets within range of them, which involves setting the delay to 1. Or they're not. And in the Green Beacon Cave, depending upon if you're in a hard version of the map or not, it's either the case that either every 1 in 5 or every 1 in 9 spawners will be primed. And so the Green Beacon, it's the first area, it's supposed to be easy, and so the idea is if you run quickly through the cave and just place torches, you can light it up, although occasionally there's going to be a prime spawner that will have already spawned mobs in front of you, and so it'll slow you down a little bit. But oftentimes you can kind of blitz through long sections of the cave very quickly and light it up before the spawners have a chance to spawn. And yeah, and then there's similar kind of data for the Purple Beacon, the Mountain Peak, the Flat Cobweb Outer, and Flat Cobweb Inner. There's kind of like 2 concentric circles where I change the... I don't actually change the proportions of the different mobs, the spiders, witches, and cave spiders in the Flat Cobweb dungeon, the Red Beacon area. But I do change the spider jockey percentage that you will see later on in terms of what percentage of the spider spawners are actually spider jockey spawners that are going to spawn with skeletons on their back. And so yeah, as you get closer to the center of the Red Beacon area, it's more likely that you're going to encounter skeleton jockeys, spider jockeys. And yeah, and then there is stuff with diorite and granite and redstone. And basically the way that I have silverfish and random mob spawners in the underground, just in various cave systems randomly in the wall, is that I am using Minecraft's customization settings, where you can change the, ore and dungeon frequencies or whatever when you create a customized world on the Minecraft world creation screen. And so what I do is I have small chunks of diorite and granite and redstone, and I go and I replace them, and diorite becomes silverfish, and granite becomes one type of spawner, and redstone becomes another type of spawner. And so granite spawns kind of throughout the world, and so kind of like anywhere throughout the world, you might get spawners of zombies or skeletons or spiders or occasionally creepers, just in cave walls. And then redstone only spawns near the bottom of the map, and so near the bottom of the map, you might get some of those, but you might also get blaze and cave spiders just as random spawners that are found in the walls of caves. And so that's how I accomplish that. I have Minecraft do kind of the heavy lifting of randomly placing some of these blocks throughout cave systems in the world, and then I just go and substitute them out from one block type to another. And right, and then you know that the vanilla dungeon extra is basically when my substitution goes throughout the world and changes the blocks in the world. Whenever it finds a spawner that was already in Minecraft because it was in a dungeon or because it was in a mineshaft cave spider kind of thing, it goes and adds an extra spawner on top. And basically the algorithm I use is if the original kind was spider or cave spider, then I add a skeleton spawner above it. And otherwise, for everything else, I add a cave spider above it. So you always get spiders and some other mob. And yeah, those spawners are primed, so they immediately spin up, and they also spawn mobs more quickly. On average, or just like by default, if you find a spawner in Minecraft in a dungeon, it will spawn every 10 to 40 seconds. And the spawners that I have spawn every 10 to 20 seconds. And so basically I'm changing their max spawn delay. Rather than being 800 ticks, it's 400 ticks. Biome hell and biome sky percentage is basically, you will notice that I change some plains biomes to either nether or end, and that just interacts with what percentage of those biomes I actually go and replace. And there are just some constants that are kind of like ranges on the map. So how far away do you have to get from spawn before you could encounter your first green beacon, or encounter your first flat dungeon, which is the red beacon, or encounter the first peak, which is the mountain beacon, or encounter the purple beacon. And so it's just constants. 200 is the daylight radius, and so that's where the pillars are, that if you go outside that, it gets dark. And a little bit farther than that is the closest that the first green beacon could be. And a little, further out is where you could encounter the red beacon, and then further out is where you'd encounter the mountain peak, and further out is where you would encounter the purple dungeon. And so basically these are just constants for checking the radius of how far away you are from spawn. So whenever it's trying to place one of these dungeons, it has to validate that it's outside of that range, so that, as I talked about in previous dev commentary episodes, one of the ways I try to steer the player in the right progression path is to make it so they'll find the easy things nearby first, and then as they get farther and farther away from spawn, they'll go out and find some of the harder dungeons. And yeah, I think those are the things in customization knobs that I want to talk about. Some of these things we'll see again later and will make more sense. Next up, let's take a look at strings. And as I said before, it's basically just all of the text that is in the map, so that if I want to translate it to another language, I can do so. Minecraft has some features for translating text in certain JSON contexts, so that you can put it in a resource pack and people can just change the resource pack, but it doesn't work everywhere yet. And so, like the names of blocks, if I have the mysterious divining rod, you can't, use a resource pack to change that to another foreign language. And so I'm doing it all in programming rather than using Minecraft features, because that way I could, in theory, do it all correctly. And I've actually had a couple people offer to translate the map into French or German, and I may try to pick that up, take them up on that at some point, so that I can make versions of the map that then I can try to go, advertise to, German Minecraft players who might want to play a 1.9 CTM map or something. But in any case, yeah, I'll just have a few screenshots, and there's just a bunch of constants that, have the names of items and the text that appears on the proximity detector for cold, warm, and hot, or books that you find in various chests and the text of those books. And Yeah, so basically it's just one file that I could go through and change all the text in, and it would change all the text that appears in the map, so that if I needed to translate it to a foreign language so that people could play the map in a foreign language, then they would be able to do so. There's really not a whole lot to say. Now let's talk about loot tables. Loot tables. Minecraft 1.9 added loot tables, which basically allow people to write some data to files on disk in the map folder that affect what mobs drop and can affect what certain chests in the world contain, which is a pretty cool and powerful feature. And they came out right around the time in the 1.9 snapshots that I think it was around the time or a little after when 3.2 was doing Eventide Trance, which was a mini CTM map that I played of his, and it relied a lot on random loot, where he was basically substituting loot drops. And so zombies, rather than dropping, rotten flesh, instead they would drop occasionally, I don't remember what they drop, gold nuggets and gold ingots or something that you could, combine to make golden apples to heal up, because that was a UHC map. And so I had the idea of random loot on the brain, and then Mojang said they were adding this feature, and it seemed pretty cool. And so I started building the map using the Mojang loot table features, and it works pretty well for mobs, and it does not work for chests. Or rather, it kind of does work, but there are a couple of critical bugs. As well as the way that it just kind of displays the loot in the chests that I really hated. And so I ended up abandoning using loot tables that are implemented in Minecraft for my loot chests. And instead, I just populate all the chests directly so that I can have the loot in the chests behave correctly. But yeah, the major bug, and it's something that I reported to Mojang and they took a look at and they never fixed, is basically some of the loot that you specified be in a chest does not end up in the chest, because that's just the way it's coded, which I'm pretty sure is a bug and is not intentional, but I reported it to them like a week after they added the feature, and they never fixed it over the next 6 months, even though people looked at it multiple times. So, yeah, as usual, Minecraft is a game full of bugs, and so basically I re-implemented, I'd already, written a bunch of code using the Mojang loot tables, and then I discovered this bug that it basically didn't work, and there was no way to work around it. And so I re-implemented loot tables in the same general format as Mojang, just kind of in my own code, so that I could take all the stuff that I'd already written for putting stuff in chests and then apply it to, actually just writing the chest directly rather than going through Mojang's loot table code. Okay, I'm rambling. Let's talk about the loot. And so yeah, the way that I initially envisioned things is that there would be 1 to 4 or 1 to 5 tiers of different things. And so there'd be armor in tiers, and tools in different tiers, and food in different tiers. And so the food is one that actually did get preserved kind of all the way through the map, and I've talked about previously. There's 5 tiers of food. There are cookies, apples, bread, steak, and golden apples are the 5 tiers of food that you can get. And so when mobs have random drops, each mob has a certain percentage chance of dropping food in a particular tier. And so, for example, I'll try to show a screenshot of the zombie drops. And one of the things, there's a whole bunch of code here that's just kind of declarative code that's trying to specify what zombies should drop. But tier XY loot percentage 1 to food 12. Tier XY loot percentage is a function that basically says drop loot at this tier or this tier, in this case 1 or 2, at this percentage, 12%. And so basically 12% of the time zombies will drop tier 1 food, which is a cookie, and a smaller percent of the time, I think it's like a fifth of that or whatever, they'll drop a tier 2% food, which in that case would be an apple. And if I show a different mob, like silverfish, Silverfish will drop food from tier 2 or tier 3 at 20%. And so 20% of the time, silverfish are going to drop apples. And occasionally they'll even drop bread, which is the tier 3 food. And so, yeah, just for each mob, I just decided kind of like based on its difficulty, what type of food should it drop? And then similarly, back in the zombie table, there's things like armor and tools. And so there's a 6% chance that zombies will drop tier 1 armor, for example. And the tier 1 armor is just unenchanted gold armor. And I originally, when I was doing this, like did things with leather armor, and leather armor is basically useless. It's just aesthetic. The amount of armor rating as well as durability that you get from leather just makes leather completely not worth it as loot in a CTM map, in my opinion. Unenchanted at least. And so I decided to make the tier 1 armor be unenchanted gold, and the tier 2 armor is enchanted gold. And so you've seen lots of those loot drops where you'll get, gold pants, or gold pants that might have, protection 2 on them, or gold pants that might have something relatively useless on them, like, fire protection 1 or something. Yeah, and so basically I just, for each mob, have come up with some loot that, if I take a look at skeletons, for example, includes some of their usual loot drops, things like bones, as well as there's a thing over here for arrows as well, 1 of an n% arrows 16, so there's a 16% chance, about 1 in 6, that skeletons will drop some arrows. And so I wanted to keep some of the usual loot drops from mobs, just because while I do really change the way that mobs drop loot, I also wanted things to be somewhat familiar. And so if people wanted to guess, if I wanted to get arrows, what mob should I kill? Yes, if you try to kill skeletons, you may get some arrows. And if you want bones, because you're trying to grow a bread farm or wheat farm, what mob should I kill? Yes, you should try killing skeletons, because they are still going to drop bones. And so while there are a bunch of things that the player will just have to pick up and learn or try to infer as a result of playing the map in order to discover certain loot drops, I was trying to play into what people already knew about Minecraft for some familiar drops and keep some of the familiar drops around. And then finally, a lot of the same kind of loot system is done, for example, for the green beacon chest, a tier 3 chest. And there's some code here for tier 3 items. And above that, it declares, tier 3 armor books are protection 1 through 3, or feather falling 1 through 4, or blast protection 1 through 3, or projectile protection 1 through 3. And then a little bit further down, it says choose N books. With RNG, which is my random number generator. F of 3. F is the loot function, which decides for single player or multiplayer to loot how many things one should have, and then tier 3 armor books. And so basically in single player, you will get 3 tier 3 armor books. In a multiplayer version of the map, you will get some multiplier of tier 3 armor books. And so it will choose random books out of protection 1 through 3, feather falling 1 through 4, blast protection 1 through 3, or projectile protection 1 through 3. And similarly, it's going to choose 2 tier 3 melee books and 2 tier 3 utility books, things like efficiency and unbreaking. It will have inner chests and instructions that contain the dungeon loot. That's the sample tier 2 chest, so the 2 kind of inner chests. It has a bunch of experience bottles and diamond pickaxe and a diamond sword, and the loot chest with the proximity detector, and some iron and gold ingots and some good food. And yeah, and so basically, yeah, I've got a number of helper functions here, things like choose N books that basically use a random number generator in order to pick, exactly which books to put in each individual chest. And so there's similar functions for all of the different chests that you get out of the different dungeons. And then there's also code similarly for the aesthetic chests, is what I call them. Basically the surface chests that you find with the loot finder box. And so there's a new aesthetic tier 1 chest. And it is going to pick N items non-independently, and it will pick a certain number of things out of it just has blocks, for example, and so stone or brick or stone brick stairs or hardened clay or netherrack or grass or mossy cobblestone or obsidian or ice are different things that it will pick some blocks to put in that chest. And it will pick some utility blocks, which are basically wood blocks, because everyone needs more wood when they're trying to do one of these maps. And some people also just want to, build a house out of wood. So I want to give people different types of wood. And there's a 1 in 4 chance that you'll get some name tags for fun if you want to have some pets that you're going to name. And in the most recent version of the map, in the hard version that I released, there's also alphabet banners that can occasionally appear in chests. And so they're basically banners that have, like the letters, A through Z. So if you want to like make big signs or something, I don't know what you might want to do with them, but they're there and they're kind of fun. The emeralds are the tradable items. Make a random book based on a static level. And so there is... there's different tiers of these loot chests, and there's different levels, and the level is kind of how far away from spawn you are, and so the farther out you are, the better the loot will be. And so if you're right near spawn, you'll find some things that have some good things, and if you go farther out into the darkness, you'll find some better loot. And yeah, the random books then in terms of, whether you're going to get, a book with protection 2 versus a book with, fire protection 1 or something is kind of related based on that. You get some anvils. If there's a 1 in 5 chance, you might get some ender pearls, which people don't actually use in the map very often. But I wanted to give them out because, I don't know, if people want to try to, use them as a clever escape tactic, more power to them. And the stained glass blocks that appear in these different chests. And so the calling function says, what color stained glass should go in this particular chest. And we'll eventually get to that code as well. Yeah, so that kind of gives us an idea of how I've structured and coded up the loot tables. I'm glossing over a lot of it, but I'm not sure to a wide audience the best way to try to describe this. But hopefully that made some sense. I think that's probably a good place to end this first video. And so... there's still a lot of code to talk about, but rather than record any more of it now, I'm going to go ahead and just make this video and air it and kind of like get feedback from people to see if what I'm talking about is useful, and if people have any suggestions for other ways to present the material before I try to record any more of this. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Give me suggestions and feedback if you have any, and I hope as always you guys are having a great day, and I'll see you again soon with more developer commentary of Vanilla Swirl, where I try to talk about how I implemented various things in the map. Bye-bye.